I don't know if you need it, but I need it. I need to talk on this thing every day in order to let the river flow, let that drain pipe, that Doris's drain pipe flow out. And I want to wish you good morning, tell you I love you very, very much. And it's Stevie the Guide here from Kerrville, Texas. It's 5 a.m. and I'm ready to talk about something. And that's just the way I roll. And since this whole thing exploded out of me last week, this is my seventh time to do this. I'm getting the hang of it a little bit, but I don't know where it's going, folks. I don't know where it's going, but I did pull up this thing. I thought that now that a little bit of the front edge of this stuff has come out, I pull out this what I call a brainstorm sheet, and over the last few years, really, every time I sort of had a thought, I'd write it down on a piece of paper, and I got to where there were so many little pieces of paper with my little brainstorm thoughts all over them that I had to start putting it into some kind of order, or my whole office would just fill up with little pieces of paper. And I'd write them on my, in my car, on my phone, all over the place. I have sticky notes. I don't know, I can show you here. Look at the wall there next to my desk. You see all those little sticky notes? Those are just little thoughts that came to me, and I had to, stick them on the wall so they wouldn't be laying all over the desk. And so I thought it might be a good idea this morning to just give an overview. And I pressed the button on my brainstorm sheet to print it, and it was 72 pages long. All right, that's what I've been collecting over the last few years, and some of it, I'm just going to try to go over a few of the highlights that you can expect are going to be coming out on this thing over the next few weeks. And I really couldn't believe it myself, and it is totally just a partial list. I mean, I got other stuff to put on here. I haven't actually looked at this thing ever. I've never even really looked back over it. I just put little stuff in it, and it's massive. And so I thought I would just begin to give us both some sense of what's in there. Now, it's not all just my personal history. I also write little quotes that come to me, things that interest me, and stuff like that. But I thought I'd just try to stick with some of the stuff that I, have actually done. And I love this quote by Albert Einstein that says, "He who is no longer curious is as good as dead." Okay? And I'm a very curious boy, folks. A very curious boy. And those of you who know me will know that. But I wonder and question about everything. It's the reason, in part that I started traveling around the world when I was a kid. And just to get it all out there, let me share with you one of the most sensitive things. I wasn't even able to tell anybody this until I was 58 years old, all right? But the way it came about, I have this old friend, this gal that I've known for 35 years, and she asked me, she said, "Steve, I've known you a long time, and you've gotten to travel all these places. You've been a diver for the Australian Institute of Marine Science and the Galapagos Islands, and, you've been on safari in Africa, and you've been over to Asia and spent a couple of years over there, and you've just constantly been going on these adventures and exploring the planet. And why is that? I know where you come from. You come from a conservative, normal family, and they taught you the conservative, normal way. All right, go to high school, go to college, get a job, maybe go to the military. get a career, and get married and have a wife and kids, and 2 cars and a dog, and work real hard until you're about 60, and then when you retire, you can go exploring. But she said you weren't like that. You from the time you were young, because you've gotten to do so many of these things and you have such a perspective on the planet, she says from the time you were young, you chose to follow your intuition. And you followed it into jobs that would allow you to travel and move around the planet. And you weren't motivated by money. You were motivated by adventure and exploration and this curiosity of seeing everything. What was it about you? What was the thought process that whenever there was a moment in your life to turn left or turn right, and either go with what your parents and society and your teachers and your pastors and your counselors and we're all telling you to do, you chose to follow your instinct and go after adventure. And you were more motivated by your own intuition than by what they were telling you. Now, what was it about you that prompted you to do that, and thus give you this collection, this massive collection of wild experiences on this planet? And so my initial answer was, I was always wanted to be an explorer, and I was motivated by Johnny Quest and Marlin Perkins and Jacques Cousteau. I mean, you remember Marlin Perkins and the Wild Kingdom, those of you who are old enough. On Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening, right after Walt Disney, I think, and Bonanza was the Wild Kingdom with Marlin Perkins, Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. And then you had the Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau, which interested me in scuba diving. And there was actually, before that, there was Lloyd Bridges and Sea Hunt, and I was fascinated by scuba diving. And also Johnny Quest, the cartoon. And so I said, that was my answer. I said I was motivated by these people. And she said, yes, Steve, but millions of people were motivated by Johnny Quest and Marlin Perkins and Jacques Cousteau. And so, why was it that you acted upon that motivation when so many other people didn't? And I had to think about that. And like I said, my actual answer, once I thought about it, was I wasn't able to say this out loud in public for 58 years. But it is my truth, my authentic self. And to give you an idea of how open and honest I want to be, my answer is that when I was 5 years old, 2 supernatural beings came to visit me. And that's the truth, all right? That is my authentic truth. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. That's just the way it is. I was laying in my bed one night. I was levitated out through the wall of the house and put into the front yard, and where I was met by 2 taller supernatural beings. Were they aliens from another planet? Were they angels? I have no idea. But what I do know is it seemed that they had some technology. And that's because, and I couldn't really see them. They were taller than me, so I couldn't see their faces. I could see from their feet up to about, a little above their waists, and they pulled out a little thing that I associated be a small flashlight, and they shot it right here at my abdomen, and I could feel it vibrationally going in. And then that was it. And there was also some colored light little thing sitting in the yard there. It looked too small in my memory to be a spacecraft, but there it was. It had little blinking lights on it. So do with that what you will. But that's my reality. They after they gave me this treatment, this vibrational thing that they shot at me. Then they levitated me back into my bed, and that was it. I wasn't afraid, and I look upon it now as friends who came and gave me some kind of an inoculation. That's what I believe it was. And so when you ask me why was it that I trusted myself and traveled all over the planet, I think it's because they gave me something to help me not go completely to sleep when I was a little kid. You know, we go to sleep between the ages of 0 and about 6 or 7. We're wide awake. We have all these, sensory perception. And that's when little kids see things and they perceive things. But then by the time they're about 6 or 7, they shut down and they forget all that. They're told not to. In fact, kids are afraid of losing love and attention from their parents and their elders. And so when they're told that these things aren't real or to stop behaving that way, they do. It shuts down. All right. I believe these visitors from somewhere else, they gave me an inoculation to not be so afraid of following my intuition. I think they gave me something that kept me a little bit awake, and maybe that's why I've been rebellious. I don't know. Do with that what you will, all right? It's my authentic self, and that's what you're going to get around here. And we're going to talk about all sorts of unusual things here as we go along. But that was the start of it. It's my earliest memory in human life that I can recall was 2 supernatural visitors who levitated me into the front yard and shot me with a ray gun. Okay, and that's it. And so, so where did I go from there? Well, I was constantly wandering. My dad asked me sometime after that, what did I want to be when I grew up? And my answer every time he asked me something like that was, I want to be an explorer. And that's pretty much what I've been. And even in my most stable period, 20-year marriage, raising kids, I managed to get our whole family to move to southern Peru and be missionaries. And that was one of the bigger adventures of my life. And I'm grateful that I got to take my daughters and share that with them. And to share the love of Christ with people and learn that the United States of America is not the center of the universe, that there is other life out there and it's different from here. And so I'm grateful. But he who is no longer curious is as good as dead, according to Albert Einstein. And I'm just going to go through several of these 72 pages of brainstorm notes and see where that takes us. One of the guiding forces of my life is a guy named Frank Thomas. He's my oldest friend now. He's 92 years old. Frank, I know you're probably not listening, but if you are, I love you. Frank was the yard man of my mom and dad for 48 years. And I always ran to him with joy and excitement because I knew Frank was going to tell me something interesting. And so I'll be talking about some of Frank's wisdom, and then there's I had malaria in Colombia, and they said you must know God because you were talking to him all night, and that was a turning point in my life. When I was in summer school, right before going to college, I had a roommate named Marty who ran off with the Moonies down in San Francisco area. I went to a summer school class out there, and my friend Marty was taken in by the Moonies. In Indonesia one time, I drank a hallucinogenic tea, all right, at a place called the Lazy Swan Restaurant. Some people had told these German friends of mine to go and drink the special orange juice there, and I will say it was quite special. I'm going to tell you that whole story. Steve Saint, a missionary pilot, flew me back into the jungle in 1994 in Ecuador and told me the famous missionary story about how his dad and 4 of his friends were speared to death by the Waorani Indians back in 1950s. And that's how he got out to the jungle. And this was a strong influence on my life, and I'm going to tell you about Steve Saint. I was in a brothel in Thailand where the look on the face of a young prostitute who was being sold to an old, ugly-looking Arab changed my life. And I worked in China and Southeast Asia for 1985 and 86. And I had occasion to be in red light districts like Pat Pong, which is in the center of Bangkok. And I saw some things that changed my life. And, do I want my daughters knowing about all that? No, but it is part of my reality. And there's something to be learned from all that. And I'm going to be sharing it with you. I went with a pastor one time to an Ecuadorian prison. And I went down into the bowels of this giant prison, and back in there we went to meet the 8 gringos who were incarcerated for drug trafficking, and I met a young Scottish boy who just got in there, and we had a connection. We knew some of the same people, and I wound up praying with the guy, and I learned about the power of prayer in that Ecuadorian prison, and I'm going to tell you about that. I was on a safari in Africa in 1989. I was invited on this amazing safari for several weeks in southern Tanzania, and then Kenya, and stayed at the Mount Kenya Safari Club, went ballooning, and went to South Africa. But I had an experience hunting that changed my life. And when I came back, I didn't hunt for 5 years. And I had been, throughout my life, a very avid hunter. And I just wouldn't do it anymore. I would show up at our bird hunting place without my gun, and my dad thought I was crazy because I was always the top gun, Sorry about that, guys, but it's true. And I wouldn't hunt. I'll chase birds for you, but I won't kill anything. And they thought I was nuts, but it all had to do with that zebra in Africa, and I'm going to tell you about that. In South Africa, now that I mention it, I was driving around in a van, and we went past a small prison that housed Nelson Mandela. That was in 1989. He was still a prisoner. I didn't even know who he was. I'll tell you about that. Whenever the sign said "do not enter," Stevie always went in. All right. I was in a castle in France one time on a tour with my mom and my sister, and they said they looked back. There's this giant castle in Avignon. They looked back, and I was gone. Now this is the way I have run my life. For better or worse. And sometimes people are not always all that happy with me, but when the sign says "don't enter," this curious boy always wants to go in and see why you're not supposed to go in there. And so it's led me into some interesting spots. Hondo Crouch. Hondo Crouch was the founder of Luckenbach, Texas. And the song Luckenbach, Texas, about Waylon and Willie and the boys was in some part written about Hondo. He was one of the boys. Hondo, before all that Luckenbach fame, Hondo Crouch was the swim coach at Camp Champions on Lake LBJ, and he was one of my mentors. Every summer, I hung out with him as much as I could, and he left a deep impression on me. I'm going to tell you about Hondo. I'm tempted to go into these stories as I'm reading them on this 72-page list, but I'll save it, and I'm just going to go through, and it's going to take me a few years. If I do it every day, 5 days a week, it's going to take me quite a few years to get through all this. So, Captain Ken Kendrick. Who is that? He's a tugboat captain. He's probably dead by now. But the first, ocean-going job that I ever had was on a tugboat in the intercoastal waterway between Brownsville, Texas, and the Mississippi River. And I know all those areas because of Captain Ken Kendrick of Arthur Smith Barge Lines, where I did that. I lasted about 3 months, working 2 weeks on and 1 week off, and God, what a job that was. But I'm going to tell you about Captain Ken and some of those tugboat experiences. I was also, I worked for a TV show called Austin City Limits as a production assistant, and I got a perspective about the music business and a number of the stars there. I'm going to tell you about that. 1989, which was a big year for me, I went to a Tony Robbins seminar where that guy had us walking on fire and jumping off telephone poles, and I had a life-changing experience there. And I don't know what year it was, but one year I worked for a company called Digicon Exploration. Just to give you a little timeline, I didn't go right to college really after high school. I went to work in oil and gas exploration. And so I did graduate from St. Edward's University, but 4.5 years of college took me 10 full years to get it because I was jumping in and out of the oil field. And I wasn't doing oil drilling, I was doing oil exploration, which gave me a platform to run around all over the world. And it was just a real blessing in my life for a little boy who wanted to be an explorer. It gave me the gates to the world swung wide open through oil and gas exploration for me, and then I came back to Texas when the oil business crashed. I finished school. I went off to become a scuba diving and wildlife guide in the Galapagos Islands, and ran around the planet and got married and became a missionary in Peru, so. It's been a long and winding road, folks, and I've done my best to try to remember it. If you told me your name right now, I might not be able to remember it in 5 minutes from now, okay? My short-term memory doesn't work so good, but my long-term memory works great, and I can remember things that happened when I was 4 or 5 years old and all along the way. And while I can still remember, I'm going to try to share it with you, So continuing on, in the Galapagos Islands, there was a man named John Horniman who went diving with me on my very first professional dive in the Galapagos Islands. And for some reason, he was with another group, and he went down to 189 feet for some insane reason, and came back up and burst his lung and got the bends at the same time. And I had to manage this dive accident. And it was the most horrible thing, but it was a wonderful learning experience for me. And I'm going to tell you about the case of John Horniman. The diving examination that I had to take in order to be a PADI scuba diving instructor was interesting, and I will tell you just briefly about that, because I really think it encapsulates how life works here. And I believe that in whatever year it was, I think it was 1993, I became a PADI instructor, scuba diving instructor. And they take you to Huntsville for this test, and you take the written exam, and you go through the pool and do these endurance tests and tread water and do laps and all that. And then the next day they take you out to this flooded quarry, and you put on your scuba gear. And then right before you get in the water, they take your mask and they shove a piece of tinfoil in that mask, all right? And you have to swim in that flooded quarry blindfolded. You cannot see, all right? And there are instructors down in that water who mess with you, all right? They pull out your regulator and you have to get it back, and they loosen your tank, it falls out. They'll flood your mask with water, and they got a little cargo net thing they drop on you, and see if you can get out of it. And what they want to see is how you're going to react, if you are going to panic, all right? And that's the whole purpose of the exercise, the blind exercise. And I believe this life is very much like that. It is, we have very limited senses here. We have a very limited timetable in which to carry out this exercise. Life is short, baby. All right, and so your dog can probably smell and hear and even see better than you can. Certainly birds like falcons can see a lot better than you can. Your senses are limited, all right? And so I believe that part of this exercise on Earth is to see if you can develop your powers of perception wider and access a much broader bandwidth than we're taught. And the blinding of you and the confusing of you and the conditioning of you is a challenge, just like that scuba diving challenge with the foil and the mask. This life is a challenge to see if you can feel your way, and if your broader perception can open up, and it's what I talk about, and it's what I truly believe will save this this wonderful group of people called humanity, who suffer and struggle and go through all these exercises. It's the raising of that vibration, the balance between the left and right brain, that opens up a broader bandwidth, a higher frequency, and somehow or another, that's the driving force here. It's why I do this, is because that's a core purpose, is to in some small way help people wake up a little bit. So through these stories, as I continue with this long list of stories, that's the purpose. And try to find some awakening, some higher perception. We know this is so. We get little inklings, but it's like a radio station where you just barely tune it into the football game. You hear a lot of Scrabble in there, but when you get a clear signal, like from your mind, it's beautiful and it's amazing, and it's a natural, common human being experience to have extra sensory perception. Although I don't call it that. I believe it's normal sensory perception that's been clouded and shrouded, and we're just trying to tune in the radio a little bit better. But anyway, I was hired. No, I did not bullshit my way into the Australian Institute of Marine Science to get this volunteer research diver job. Okay, maybe I did. But we did have some diving experience. My friend Chris and I got a tip from a guy on a train, and we were hired by the Australian Institute of Marine Science to be volunteer divers on the Great Barrier Reef. And I'm going to tell you about that. A Kundalini experience. What the heck is Kundalini? And I just gave a talk about that at the Forbidden Discussions here in Kerrville, Texas, every Thursday night at the Unity Church here. And Kundalini, what is that? I had not heard of the term until it happened to me. And then it was like when I had malaria, after I got it, and then it was like, what is this? I got to find out what it is. And Kundalini, Kundalini, June 4th, 2014, I had a Kundalini experience, and it caused this awakening series of events. It caused me to ask much more questions. It has not been easy, folks. It has not been easy, because when you start venturing off the reservation and into areas that are taboo, some people don't like it, all right? So you got to be careful, and you don't want to throw a hand grenade into someone else's belief system that keeps them safe. The central theme is, I love the Lord. I serve the Lord Jesus Christ. I'm a follower of Christ. It's just when you get me lost in a bunch of the details surrounding that, then we're going to go way off the reservation. If you want to have a Bible debate and examine some of these unusual things in that book, I don't paint between the lines, so just be aware. Ancient stones and stories. I moved my family to southern Peru, and we became missionaries, but I was instantly taken with these giant megalithic structures all over that country. The nature of my job in Peru was to take doctors and dentists and builders and teachers all over that part of the world. And I'm telling you, the whole country's littered with these unexplainable buildings. Take 20, 50, 100-ton stones, carve them with precision, polish them mirror smooth, place them together with other giant stones with the precision of a Swiss watch, and so tightly that you can't even get a piece of paper in between. No concrete. It's the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my life. And I had a sense that somehow I was connected to the people who built them. Now, do with that what you will. It is my true, authentic human being experience. I started to feel a connection with these structures. And it's not just Machu Picchu or the city of Cusco and vicinity. It's all over the place. And because I had my own private vehicle and I was carrying doctors around these remote parts of southern Peru, every time I saw an archaeology sign, I'd cruise down the dirt road to see what it was. And I'm going to start taking trips to Peru, by the way. And if any of you guys are interested in that, let me know. Because a lot of people have expressed interest, and I'm going to start guiding tours there at some point here, probably next year. 2020 is going to be a big year, folks. It's full of all kinds of change. Let's see. I told you about Tony Robbins and the Fire Walk. I was in a storm off the North Atlantic one time way back when I was about 20. And we took a ship. I worked for a company called Geosource. And flew up to New Bedford, Massachusetts, went through the Cape Cod Canal, went up around St. John's, Newfoundland, right over where the Titanic went down. The navigator told us we were over the wreck of the Titanic, and we went into St. John's, Newfoundland, geared up, and then went out, several hundred miles offshore in about late October of the year, and got into the most wicked storm you ever saw in your life. And there was 40 men on that boat, all of different religious faiths or atheists or what have you. And at some point during that 3 or 4 day storm with 35 and 40 foot swells, and that's no ability. We had a 2-mile seismic cable strolling out behind us, and then every one of them at some point said, "Oh God, please help us," in some form or fashion. There are no atheists in the foxhole, is what they say, and I tend to believe that's true. People who say they don't believe in God, they just hadn't been under enough heat and pressure. At some point, reach out to something greater than you. It's easy. Daddy said it's easy to talk tough when you feel good, but when you feel bad, you may be beating the door down to get some help. There was this woman one time that I met in a park when I was at a low point in life, and I was trying to make a decision, and she just appeared. And these people have appeared to me so routinely, I've come to expect it. Synchronistic meetings are one of the things we talk about in Forbidden Discussions. We talk about alien visitation and out-of-body experiences and past life regression and natural healing techniques and all sorts of stuff. And these, you can call them spirit guides. You can call them coincidental meetings with normal human beings if you want to, but that is not the way it occurs to me. All right, and at a certain point, people have shown up to me. They've arrived just when I needed them. And this woman and her husband met me in a park when I was really down and I was trying to decide what to do. And she told me about how all the big decisions in life come down to a little narrow hallway. And you've got to pass through and pay a fee to get through. And it was life-changing for me. It really was. I can tell you about a little Chinese man that approached me in southern Thailand in the town of Hat Yai when I had totally miscalculated the budget and run out of money so I could buy this bus ticket to Singapore. And I was stuck on the streets of Hat Yai, Thailand for 3 days, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have a nickel. I'd become a homeless person, within a matter of 30 minutes. and I didn't know what I was going to do. And this little Chinese man appeared and pointed and told me what to do. And I'm going to tell you about him. There are many examples of that in my life. There are examples of divine protection in my life. I was thrown out of the back of a pickup truck at the corner of Hillcroft and Highway 59 in Houston. Back when a week before I turned 21, I was fired out of the back of this pickup truck. It was a 3 or 4 car collision. Everybody was hurt and went to the hospital except me. I flew 50 yards. The witnesses said I flew like Superman. And I had a feeling of being sort of carried. And under my stomach, there were hands. All right. Now, do with that what you will. It is my reality, and I'm going to share that with you. And I'm going to keep sharing honestly and authentically, and however it comes to me, it's going to free flow out of me. And that's where I'm at. There's a series of events that have happened in the last 5 years, and especially in the last 3 years, that have kind of broken me open. I call them a series of shatterings that have sort of germinated my little seed pod and caused me to cottywomble through. Cottywomble means walking purposefully in a certain as yet unknown direction towards an unknown destination, but you're walking purposefully, and it's an intuitive word. And cottywomble. And so I'm cottywombling along, folks. So I had an experience in the Galapagos Islands one night where my clients I was guiding wandered off. They wanted to take some pictures, so I was scuba diving by myself, which you're not supposed to do. But as a guide in the Galapagos, oftentimes that's exactly what I did, because my clients wanted to go off and take pictures, and I was required to be their guide, but I didn't have to hang around. And so it's nighttime, and I'm in 50, 60 feet of water, laying on the bottom of the ocean, and I felt the embrace of the ocean. I felt a part of the ocean, and I felt that my body had disappeared and I had dissolved. And so I'm going to tell you about that. What else am I going to tell you about? I've got all kinds of interests. I told you about the zebra in Africa. I got to meet Jimmy Buffett one time, and he told me and some other people about how he and Jerry Jeff Walker were college roommates, and they both went to Key West together. And one of the sayings I like from Jimmy Buffett is, life is full of risk. All right, you either get out there and take some, or you sit at home and watch other people do it on TV. All right, and that's the way it is, folks. And if you're sitting around, you may have a comfortable nest, and I have found that a lot of people really don't care about travel that much, but a whole lot of them do. And some of them, they would like to, but they're a little scared, or they don't want to step out. Or there's a lot of unknown factors with adventure physically and adventure mentally, which is what we're doing now. And I'm going on an adventure here, which is what an explorer boy like me likes to do, curious adventurer. I am not physically traveling, but I am going to travel with you day after day after day on this little mental journey, and it's going to help open me up more and more and more, and who knows where it'll go. I'm cottywombling, I'll just wander around. Talk about Archimedes' principle, Hellenistic synchronicity or synchronism. What does that mean? I've written things down on this list that I'm just curious about. Occult knowledge and secret brotherhoods, that's written on here. Like the Masons, the Rosicrucian churches resist the possibility of alien life or ancient civilization because it would tamper with the story of God's word. We're gonna go way off the reservation here. I don't know how many years ago I wrote this, but It's stuff that I'm just curious about. What is a three-stranded particle beam whip? I don't know. That's just something I wrote down. But I'll tell you, that brings to mind a whole body of information that we're going to talk about from last year. Because last year, after my whole life had, sort of come unraveled, and I moved to Austin, Texas, and I got a job as a driver of a limousine. I worked for a limousine company in Austin, Texas, and I drove around very high-end people, and I met some really cool, sort of celebrities and rap stars. I met Future and Flo Rida, and people like that. I met who's that kid on the Gilmore Girls, that young guy, I can't remember his name, nice guy. Anyway, but one of the most interesting groups of people that I met in Austin, Texas over the last year was the heads of the tech industry. These are the kind of guys that ride around in limos, and I take them to their private jets back behind Austin Airport. And so I had an occasion to have a few minutes with some very interesting people. And the job sure didn't pay very much, but it was fascinating. And so I formulated a question. If the people felt like talking, I formulated a question of from where you sit in your company, what is the most world-changing thing that's going to affect my future in the next 3 to 5 years? And I got all kinds of answers. After I asked them, I would just shut up and let them talk. And I talked with several of the captains of Dell Computer. They talk about artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things. That basically means they're going to hook the internet up to everything right down to your toaster and your wristwatch, and they're going to monitor everything. All right, this does not seem like good news to me. The Watson or the Hey Siri. One time I put this piece of tape on. I had a piece of tape on that, and I said, because I don't feel like being on international television right now. And she said, well, no, but they can't see you unless you turn it on. I said, oh, really? All right. I said, hand me your telephone. And she did. And I said, hey, Siri. And all of a sudden, it was like, yeah, what do you want? I said, that phone. Defense is spending hundreds of millions of dollars with Harvard to develop nano insect drone technology. These little bugs they're creating, they swim, they fly, they walk around. They can go inside your house. You wouldn't even know it. It would be like a house fly. And they can explode, squirt gas, and land on you and sting you with something. I mean, it's not something I worry about at night, but I know it is reality. Your tax dollars, hundreds and hundreds of millions of your tax dollars and mine, are being spent to develop every type of technology you can possibly think of. And it's going at lightning speed, all right? And the Russians, the Chinese, the Indians, and others are all in competition with us to stay on the front edge of this technology war. And I learned I got a very keen sense of that technology war. And I'm going to tell you a lot about that. The one most fascinating and freaky conversation I had with one of these tech executives was a lady who ran a genetic engineering firm in Austin. And she was telling me about genetically altered people. and that is a reality, and you just don't know it yet. All right, and that computer code is the same thing as genetic code. It's just mix and match. Once you got it figured out, and artificial intelligence is running through all the calculations for the various components of it, and it's our reality, folks, and the world is changing, and it's my belief, once again, that the way that we can move in a changing world, the way that we can rise to the occasion, is through the development of our right brain intuitive, and to do those exercises that will help us do that, to bring about a balance in this left and right brain, lopsided brain that we live in, and it will bring about a higher frequency, a higher vibration, a higher resonance, so that we can access a broader picture here. And I truly believe that that's the way to go. I believe it's that Christ consciousness that we're after. And Jesus said, I don't know which scripture it is, but they will do these things and more, referring to human beings. And I believe that is so. And so rising to a higher consciousness is what I'm all about here. And through the stories, I honestly believe that somehow I was allowed, these visitors that came to see me, they helped me stay enough awake to where I would go and explore the planet and look around and get to know things, get a perspective, so that I could come back and carry out this mission. And I'm on a mission from God, folks, just like Jake and Elwood said. And do with that what you will. But I believe that if we keep each other in the conversation, if we acknowledge and not be afraid of those natural human being experiences that people are commonly having, all right? They do have this wider perception. It's like a flickering light bulb. They say, hey, what was that? I saw that. I felt that. But I don't want to tell anybody. And why? Tonight at the Forbidden Discussions here in Kerrville at 7 o'clock at the Unity Church, what I'm going to be talking about is the inner child, all right? The inner child, the inner artist, all right? That little child that's scared to do its artwork, to express itself, because it's been wounded. And the way it's been wounded, you might not have been beaten when you were a kid, but you might have been emotionally beaten. And what I mean by that is little children have to behave a certain way, or they will be in danger of not getting their parents' attention, not getting their parents' love. They live in fear of not having enough, not belonging, not being connected to their tribe and to the bosom of the people they love, all right? And so when it is in any way discouraged to develop these higher frequency skills that people, and especially children, have most commonly, they shut them down. They shut them down. And they say, oh, no, you did not see that imaginary friend, or no, you did not have that premonition. I've heard people tell me they could perceive when somebody was about to walk through the door, and when their parents realized what they could do, they'd say, don't ever do that again, okay? You're not supposed to do stuff like that. And they're afraid. And so in their fear, that inner child has shut down and become dormant. And the left brain logical has run the show. Reading, writing, arithmetic, accomplished tasks, yada, yada. But none of this intuitive stuff. No. And so paying attention to that part of ourselves is the key. I'll talk about that tonight over at Unity at the Forbidden Discussions. And you're welcome if you're in the Kerrville area, come on over and visit. It's always fun. And when I talk like this, and when I'm willing to love you enough to give you my authentic self, my full heart, my true human being experience, what I find and what I found over the last year, because I did this in Austin for that year too, every Thursday night. When I'm willing to share my most personal things and be naked with you, what I find is that people start to feel comfortable, and inevitably somebody will say, hey, you know, something happened to me one time. And I've never told my wife, I've never told my husband, never told anybody. But it's true, and that's what happens. And so it gives me a tremendous sense of satisfaction that I can comfort people enough and love them enough that they can sort of come out of the closet and say, you know what, I have a higher frequency too. And it's almost like I'm speaking their language, that they're from some, East African country where they speak a certain dialect. And all of a sudden, they're here in America and they hear someone speak their home language. That's what it's like, because they come running up to me and they say, you know what? Something happened to me. Wow, that's familiar to me. I can feel it. And if they don't have that conversation with somebody, they go crazy. They get depressed and they're anxious. And it's real, and it's happening more and more and more. And I believe it's the key to where we're going in the future. It's our very survival, because if we can't balance this left and right brain, and we keep tracking on this dominant left brain, egocentric male, energy left brain, and we can't bring some balance to it, humanity is going to have a train wreck. I mean, this is a runaway freight train on a dark and stormy night, and we're going to wreck if we can't bring some balance to it. That's what I truly feel. And so in some small way, I get to play a role. I don't know, if it'll do any good or not. I don't know if anybody's really listening out there, except one or two people who I love, who tell me, oh, it's so good, but it's what I have to do. It's my art. I have to do this, because I was getting sick. I was actually beginning to wither and die by not speaking. And the Forbidden Discussions exercise, talking every Thursday night with 20, 30, 50 people, it's been good therapy for me, and I'm appreciative of all those folks who have come and shared, and we've been able to discuss these things, because it's given me more of a comfort level to come right out. I can tell you, it was very hard for me to start talking in front of this camera. All right, there are many people I did not want to share this with, but I have to. I have to come out. I only have a certain number of minutes left in this life before I take off. All right, this thing is going to happen, and we're winding down here. If you're my age, you're 60 years old, we are winding down. It's time to get real with whoever you are. All right, it's time to begin wrapping up your mission here on this planet. All right, and so in whatever way that manifests itself, try to settle yourself down. Do some meditation. Do some yoga. Do some creative art. This book I was showing you yesterday, I highly encourage this book, The Artist's Way. It's such good therapy, by Julia Cameron. It's a wonderful book, and it gives you exercises to sort of relax that left brain logical and bring up that right brain intuitive. Really good stuff in there. Read it. I'm doing whatever I can here, and I love you very, very much. I do, and I get to love people more and more and more as I go along, and hopefully it cleans up some of my karma, because the Lord knows I need that, and that's about all I can really tell you. There's a couple of people here that sent me a message. Robert Patrick, hey Bubba, how you doing? Oh, the sound is out again. It's a strange technological world. I'm not running any YouTube videos. Yesterday, my talk got shut down, and I don't know what to do about that. I put a YouTube video on there, and I think it was a copyright infringement thing, so they blocked it. And so, but I'm just learning as I go along, and I'm just going to keep on talking. So anyway, I love you, and I hope you have a wonderful, great day. Practice, developing that right brain. It's fun, and it's what's needed. So Stevie the Guide here in Kerrville, Texas. I'll see you tomorrow.